You think you're ready for World War III. You've got your bug-out bag, your ammo, maybe even a year's worth of freeze-dried meals stacked in the basement. But let me tell you something that'll make your stomach drop. 92% of preppers will die in the first week of full-scale conflict, and it won't be from nuclear fire or enemy troops. It'll be from doing exactly what everyone else is doing. My name's irrelevant, but my resume isn't. 12 years active duty, 3 combat deployments, NATO strategic planning, and enough classified briefings to know that what they're telling you on the news is a sanitized fairy tale. The real first week of World War III looks nothing like Red Dawn or Call of Duty. It's uglier, faster, and more chaotic than your brain can process. And the 8 things I'm about to share with you are the difference between becoming a statistic and becoming one of the 8% who make it to week 2. Stick with me for the next 28 minutes, because I'm going to shatter every myth you've been fed, and by the end you'll have a framework that most civilians, and honestly most soldiers, never get. If you want to survive, you need to stop thinking like a prepper and start thinking like an operator. Let's go. Here's the lie everyone believes. When the missiles fly, you grab your gear and head for the hills. Wrong. Dead wrong. The first 72 hours of World War III will not be a bug-out scenario. It'll be a lockdown scenario. And if you're on the road when the hammer drops, you've just signed your own death warrant. I've seen the models. I've read the after-action reports from every major conflict since Desert Storm. The survival curve is brutal. In the first 6 hours, 30% of unprepared civilians suffer critical supply failures, water, meds, heat. By hour 24, that number jumps to 60%. By day 3, 85% of people who evacuated are either dead, injured, or captured. The ones who survive aren't the ones with the fanciest gear or the biggest guns. They're the ones who understood the tempo of modern warfare and adapted faster than their neighbors. So let's talk about thing number 1, and I promise you, this is going to piss off half the survival community. Thing number 1, forget bugging out. Harden your primary location in the next 48 hours. Everyone's obsessed with their bug-out plan. They've got routes mapped, rally points marked, caches buried in the woods. That's great for a localized disaster. But World War III isn't a hurricane. It's a synchronized multi-domain catastrophe that will shut down every highway, bridge, and backroad within hours. You think you're going to load the family into the SUV and cruise to your cousin's cabin in Montana? Newsflash. So does everyone else, and the military's already gamed this out. Interstate congestion will hit gridlock levels within 90 minutes of the first strike. Fuel stations will run dry in 4 hours. By hour 12, you'll have armed checkpoints, roadblocks, and roving gangs targeting anyone stupid enough to be mobile. The survival rate for vehicular evacuation during the opening phase of a pure conflict scenario is estimated at 11%. 11. That means 89 out of every 100 families who bug out will fail. Vehicle breakdown, ambush, exposure, starvation, you name it. I watched this exact scenario unfold in the Balkans, in Iraq, in Syria. The refugees on the road are always the first to die. So what's the unconventional solution? You stay put, and you turn your home into a hardened position in the next 48 hours. I'm talking about real fortification, not Pinterest prepper porn. Start with your entry points. Every door, every window, every vent. You need steel security bars on ground floor windows. Installed now, not next week. You need solid core doors with reinforced frames and grade. 1 deadbolts. You need to pre-position sheet metal or plywood reinforcements that you can bolt over windows in under 10 minutes. Why? Because the scientific reality of urban warfare is that most casualties occur during forced entry. A study from the siege of Sarajevo showed that homes with reinforced entry points had a 73% lower casualty rate than standard residences. The multiplier principle here is massive. Every hour you delay an intruder is an hour they're exposed, an hour you're regrouping, an hour you're surviving. But it's not just about keeping people out. It's about keeping you in. You need blackout capability for every window, because light discipline will be the difference between being invisible and being a target. You need to pre-position water, at least 100 gallons per person, stored in food-grade containers, hidden in the basement or ground floor interior room. You need a sanitation plan that doesn't rely on plumbing, because water and sewer will be the first infrastructure to fail. I'm talking 5-gallon buckets, heavy-duty trash bags, and lime for waste management. Gross? Absolutely. Necessary? You have no idea. Here's the practical application. This weekend, you're going to conduct a 72-hour lockdown drill. No leaving the house. No using city water after hour 12. No flushing toilets after hour 24. You're going to find every gap in your plan, every supply you forgot, every moment of friction that'll cost you in the real thing. And you're going to fix it before the sirens start. The families who survive the first week aren't the ones with the most stuff. They're the ones who tested their stuff and knew it worked. But here's the kicker, and this is the part that nobody talks about. Even a hardened home is only as strong as the intel you have about what's happening outside. Which brings us to thing number 2, and this one's going to sound paranoid until you realize it's standard operating procedure for every military unit on the planet. Thing number 2, build a local intelligence network in the next 72 hours, or die blind. You know what kills you faster than lack of food? Lack of information. In every combat zone I've ever operated in, the guys who survived weren't the ones with the best gear. They were the ones who knew what was happening 3 blocks away, 3 hours before it arrived. But here's the mistake 90% of preppers make. They go lone wolf. They don't talk to their neighbors. They don't build relationships. They don't establish any kind of early warning network. And when the world goes sideways, they're sitting in their fortified house, totally blind, until the problem kicks down their door. I've seen 100 times. Good people, good gear, dead because they had zero situational awareness. Your smartphone isn't going to save you. Cell towers will be priority targets in the first wave of attacks, either kinetic strikes or cyber attacks. GPS will be jammed or spoofed. Internet will be intermittent at best. Completely dark at worst. Within 6 to 12 hours of hostilities, you'll have zero electronic communication with the outside world. So, how do you know when the grid drops? How do you know if there's a gang 2 streets over? How do you know if the government's distributing supplies at the local school or if it's a trap? You need human intelligence, and that means you need people. Here's the unconventional solution, and I want you to do this in the next 72 hours. Identify 5 households within a 2-block radius that you can trust, and you're going to establish a dead-drop communication system. I'm talking old school, low-tech, non-electronic. You pick a neutral location, a fence post, a tree with a hollow, a loose brick in a wall, and you establish a signal protocol. A red ribbon means danger. A white cloth means all clear. A blue mark means request for meetup. You rehearse this with your network, so that in the fog of war, you have a way to pass critical intel without exposing yourself. The science behind this is rooted in game theory and network resilience. A mesh network of 5 to 7 nodes has a 94% probability of maintaining at least one functional communication line, even if 3 nodes are compromised. But it's not just about passing messages. It's about collective security. One person can't watch all 4 directions. One person can't stay awake for 72 hours straight. But 5 households coordinating shifts can establish a neighborhood watch that spots threats early and responds fast. The multiplier here is exponential. Your effective security perimeter goes from 30 feet to 300 feet. Your early warning time goes from 0 seconds to 5 minutes, and your survival probability jumps by a factor 4. This isn't some militia fantasy. This is how villages in Iraq survived ISIS, how neighborhoods in Sarajevo survived the siege, how humans have survived every peer conflict in history. Now, before we go further, I need you to do something. Pause this video for 5 seconds and ask yourself, do I actually know my neighbors' names? Because if the answer is no, you got 48 hours to fix that, and it might be the most important prep you ever do. Drop a comment below with a number of neighbors you could trust in crisis. I'm curious how many of you are already thinking about this. Okay, let's keep moving, because thing number 3 is going to make you rethink everything you know about food storage, and I'm about to tell you why your freeze-dried mountain house meals are a liability, not an asset. Thing number 3, ditch the bulk food storage. Prioritize caloric density and stealth nutrition for week 1. Here's a mistake. You've got 50-pound bags of rice, 20-pound bags of beans, shelves full of canned goods. It's visible, it's bulky, and in the first week of World War III, it's a death sentence. Why? Because every neighbor, every desperate stranger, every organized gang is going to be looking for one thing: food. And if they see you eating, if they smell you cooking, if they hear the clatter of cans, you've just painted a target on your back. I watched this exact dynamic play out in Fallujah. Houses with visible food stores were hit first. Always. The insurgents didn't waste time on empty buildings. They went straight for the ones that showed signs of supply. Human predation follows the path of least resistance, and in a resource-scarce environment, the guy with a giant food stockpile is the lowest hanging fruit. Here's the unconventional solution. For week one, you're not eating meals. You're consuming calories in the most compact, silent, no-cook form possible. I'm talking about caloric density that makes freeze-dried food look like a joke. Peanut butter, 2 tablespoons, 190 calories, 0 cooking, 0 odor. A standard 40-ounce jar has about 6,500 calories, enough to sustain one adult for 3 days of moderate activity. Honey, 1 tablespoon, 64 calories, never expires, antimicrobial properties, and you can eat it straight from the jar in the dark. Nuts, almonds, walnuts, cashews, 600 to 700 calories per cup, shelf-stable for years if vacuum-sealed, and you can carry a day's worth of calories in a cargo pocket. Dark chocolate, 150 to 200 calories per ounce, fits in a backpack, morale booster, and contains theobromine, a mild stimulant that'll keep you alert when you're running on no sleep. Sardines, canned tuna, or salmon, packed in oil, you're looking at 300 to 400 calories per can. Complete protein, omega, 3 fatty acids for cognitive function under stress. These aren't gourmet. They're survival rations optimized for the first 72 to 168 hours when operational security is everything. The science here is basic thermodynamics and human metabolism. Your brain requires about 400 to 500 calories per day just to maintain executive function. Your basal metabolic rate is another 1,200 to 1,500. And if you're doing any physical labor, moving supplies, reinforcing your home, standing watch, you're burning another 500 to 1,000. That's 2,200 to 3,000 calories per day minimum. But here's the kicker. You don't need to eat 3 meals. You need to maintain glucose availability for your brain and prevent muscle catabolism. Small, frequent, high-calorie snacks do that better than traditional meals, and they produce zero cooking signature. No smoke, no smell, no noise. You're a ghost. The multiplier principle. Every meal you don't cook is a meal that doesn't advertise your location. Every calorie you store in a compact form is a calorie you can carry if you have to move. Every no-cook food item you stockpile is an item that doesn't require fuel, and fuel, propane, firewood, charcoal, will be worth more than gold by day 4. Practical application. Right now, today, you're going to go to Costco or Sam's Club, and you're going to buy 10 jars of peanut butter, 5 jars of honey, 20 pounds of mixed nuts, 50 bars of dark chocolate, and 100 cans of sardines or tuna. Total cost, about $300. Total caloric load, north of 150,000 calories. Enough to keep a family of 4 alive for 10 to 14 days with zero cooking. You're going to vacuum seal the nuts and chocolate. You're going to store everything in opaque containers so nobody can see what you have. And you're going to keep it in a cool, dark, interior location. This is your week 1 food supply. And it's designed to keep you invisible, mobile, and alive while everyone else is fighting over the last bag of rice at the looted grocery store. But food is only half the equation, because the thing that'll actually kill you first isn't starvation. It's dehydration, infection, or a medical emergency you can't treat. Which brings us to thing number 4, and this is where most people's preps fall apart completely. Thing number 4, stop buying gadgets. Build a trauma medical kit that matches military combat lifesaver standards. Here's the lie. You think your first aid kit from Walmart is going to save you. It's not. That little plastic box with the cartoon bandages and the single-use antiseptic wipes is designed for scraped knees and paper cuts, not the kind of traumatic injuries you're going to see in the first week of a near-peer conflict. We're talking blast injuries, penetrating trauma, crush injuries, burns, fractures, and hemorrhagic shock. The leading cause of preventable death on the battlefield is uncontrolled hemorrhage. You bleed out in 3 to 5 minutes, and if you don't have the tools and the knowledge to stop it, you're done. I've held pressure on wounds while waiting for medevac. I've packed bullet holes with gauze. I've applied tourniquets to mangled limbs. And I can tell you right now, if you're not prepared to manage severe bleeding, You're not prepared for anything. Here's the unconventional solution, and this is non-negotiable. You're going to build a combat lifesaver level medical kit, and you're going to train on it until procedures are muscle memory. Start with hemorrhage control. You need at least 4 CAT or SOFT tourniquets, 1 for each limb, because the data shows that early tourniquet application reduces mortality from extremity hemorrhage by over 90%. You need hemostatic gauze, quick clot combat gauze, or C-locks. At least 4 packs, because you can pack deep wounds in the groin, armpit, neck, or abdomen where a tourniquet won't work. You need Israeli or H bandages for pressure dressings, at least 6. You need chest seals for penetrating thoracic injuries, hyphen or high vent, for sets, because a sucking chest wound will kill you in under 10 minutes if you don't seal it. You need a nasopharyngeal airway to maintain a patent airway in an unconscious casualty. You need trauma shears to cut away clothing. You need nitrile gloves, at least 20 pairs, because bloodborne pathogens are a thing. You need a sharpet to mark tourniquet application time, because that information will determine whether a limb can be saved. Total cost of this kit, about $350 to $400. That's less than most people spend on tactical gear they'll never use, and this will literally save lives. The science here is evidence-based battlefield medicine. The Tactical Combat Casualty Care, TCCC, guidelines are developed from thousands of combat casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they reduce preventable death rates by over 30%. The 3 priorities are: stop the bleeding, start the breathing, protect the wound. Everything else is secondary. But here's the part nobody tells you. Having the gear is worthless if you don't know how to use it. A tourniquet applied incorrectly can cause permanent nerve damage or limb loss. Hemostatic gauze stuffed into a wound without proper packing technique won't stop the bleed. A chest seal placed on a sweaty, dirty chest won't maintain suction. You need training and you need reps. The multiplier here is life itself. 1 person in your household with trauma medical skills can treat 6 to 8 casualties before supplies run out. That's your family, your neighbors, your network. But more than that, it's a psychological force multiplier. Knowing that you can handle the worst-case scenario means you stay calm while everyone else is panicking, and calm is contagious. All right, we're halfway through, and I know some of you are thinking, this is darker than I expected. Good. It should be. Because the first week of World War III won't be a camping trip. It'll be the most violent, chaotic, unforgiving environment you've ever experienced. And the only way you survive is by accepting that reality now and preparing accordingly. If you're still with me, drop a comment with the word ready. I want to see who's actually committed to this. Now let's talk about thing number 5. And this one's going to separate the serious preppers from the LARPers. Thing number 5, establish a defensive posture and rules of engagement for your home, right now. Here's the mistake. People think they'll figure out security when the time comes. They imagine they'll just defend their home if someone tries to break in. But here's the reality. In the first 72 hours of a collapse scenario, you're going to face desperate people, organized gangs, and opportunistic predators who've been planning for this longer than you have. If you don't have a pre-established defensive plan, fields of fire, sectors of responsibility, engagement protocols, you're going to hesitate, and hesitation gets you killed. I've seen in Ramadi, Mosul, and Kabul, the difference between a defended position and a slaughterhouse is about 3 seconds of decision-making, and if you're trying to figure out the rules on the fly, you've already lost. Here's the unconventional solution. This week, you're going to sit down with every adult in your household, and you're going to draft a written defensive plan and rules of engagement. You're going to walk your property and identify every approach vector, front door, back door, windows, fence lines. You're going to assign sectors, who's watching which direction, who's the primary responder, who's the backup. You're going to establish clear trigger lines. At what point does a stranger on your property become a threat? Is it the fence, the porch, the doorknob? You need to define this now, because in the moment, you won't have time to debate philosophy. Military doctrine calls this a graduated response protocol. It looks like this: visual deterrent signage, visible barriers, verbal warning, stop, leave now, display of force, weapon at low ready, final warning, I will shoot, and then, if they cross the trigger line, you engage. No hesitation, no negotiation. The The data from urban combat environments shows that 96% of home invasions are crimes of opportunity. When confronted with prepared, determined defender, attackers disengage. But that 4% who don't, they're committed, and you need to be more committed. The science here is rooted in predator-prey dynamics and decision theory. Humans, like all predators, conduct a cost-benefit analysis before engaging a target. If the cost, risk of injury or death, exceed the benefit, food, supplies, they'll move on. Your job is to make your home a high-cost target. That means visible reinforcements, clear warnings, and a demonstrated willingness to defend. But it also means having the tools to back it up. You need a primary defensive weapon, AR-15, shotgun, or pistol-caliber carbine, staged in a quick-access safe, loaded, with a light and at least 4 spare magazines. You need a backup weapon, ideally a handgun in a rapid-deploy holster. You need ammunition, at least 500 rounds for your primary weapon, 200 for your backup, because suppressive fire isn't about accuracy. It's about making the other guy reconsider his life choices. And you need to train. I'm talking live fire practice at close quarters distances, 7, 10, 15 yards, with target transitions and reloads under stress. If you can't put 3 rounds center mass on a man-sized target at 10 yards in under 2 seconds, you're not ready. The multiplier principle. One trained defender can hold a choke point against multiple untrained attackers. 2 trained defenders in overlapping sectors can defend an entire house. 3 defenders with coordinated communication can establish a perimeter that'll make your home the last place anyone wants to hit. Practical application. Tonight, you're going to conduct a walkthrough with your family. You're going to practice responding to a breach. Who moves where, who grabs what, who makes the call to engage. You're going to run this drill until it's automatic, because when the adrenaline hits and your heart rate spikes to 160, you won't rise to the occasion. You'll default to your training. This isn't fear-mongering, it's physics. Cortisol and adrenaline impair fine motor skills and executive function. The only way to maintain performance under stress is to overtrain the basics until they're hardwired. But here's the thing nobody wants to talk about. Even the best defensive posture can be overwhelmed if you don't have a way to sustain it. Which brings us to thing number 6. And this is the prep that most people completely ignore until it's too late. Thing number 6. Pre-position backup power in communications for a minimum of 7 days. Grid down is not optional. Here's the mistake. People assume the power will come back on. They think the outage will be temporary, that the grid will recover, that their phones will work eventually. Wrong. In a near-peer conflict, the power grid is target number 1. It's not collateral damage. It's the objective. Take down the grid, and you paralyze water treatment, food distribution, medical services, communications, and public order. The North American power grid is a miracle of engineering and a catastrophic single point of failure. A coordinated attack, kinetic strikes on key substations, cyber attacks on SCADA systems, EMP over the heartland, could put the entire eastern seaboard in the dark for weeks or months. And when the power goes, everything else goes with it. No lights, no heat, no refrigeration, no phone charging, no internet, no nothing. You'll be deaf, blind, and freezing in the dark, and unless you've pre-positioned backup power in communications, you'll stay that way. Here's the unconventional solution. You're going to build a layered power and comms plan that doesn't rely on the grid, and you're going to test it this month. Layer 1, battery banks. I'm talking about high-capacity LiFePO4 power stations, Bluetti, EcoFlow, Jackery, minimum 1,500 watt-hours, ideally 3,000. These will run your critical devices, LED lights, radios, medical equipment, phone charging, for 3 to 7 days without recharge. Layer 2, solar panels. You need at least 200 watts of portable solar, foldable or rigid, that you could deploy in your yard or on your roof to recharge your battery banks during daylight. The science here is straightforward. Even in winter, you'll get 4 to 6 hours of useful sunlight per day, which translates to 800 to 1,200 watt-hours of generation. That's enough to keep your comms up and your lights on. Layer 3, communications. When cell towers go down, you need an alternative. Get a handheld ham radio. Baophone UV5 are as cheap, about $30, But better is a Yaesu or ICOM, and program it with local repeater frequencies and FRS/GMRS channels. Even without a license, in a true emergency, nobody's going to ticket you for using amateur bands. You need at least 3 radios in your network so you can coordinate with your neighbors, and you need spare batteries or a way to recharge them. Layer 4, information. You need a hand crank or solar-powered AM/FM/weather radio so you can monitor official broadcasts. And you need to understand that 90% of what you hear will be propaganda or outdated, but that 10% might save your life. The multiplier here is resilience. Every day you can maintain power and communication is a day you can coordinate, adapt, and survive. The families who went dark in the first 6 hours were cut off from information, unable to coordinate with neighbors, and easy prey for anyone with a plan. The ones who maintained comms became the nucleus of their neighborhood's survival network. But let's be real. Power and comms are force multipliers only if you have something to power and someone to communicate with. Which is why thing 7 is about the resource nobody's talking about, and it's the one that'll determine who rebuilds and who doesn't. Quick check. How many of you have actually tested your backup power in a real 72-hour blackout? Not just turn it on, but actually lived off it for 3 days straight? Comment tested if you have, because I guarantee it's less than 5% of you, and that's a problem. Testing is the only way you'll find the gaps, and in week 1, gaps are graves. All right, thing number 7 is going to sound strange, but trust me, I've seen this play out in every collapsed economy from Zimbabwe to Venezuela, and the people who figured it out early became the new power brokers. Thing number 7. Stockpile micro-barter goods and establish a neighborhood trade protocol within 96 hours. Here's a mistake. People think survival is a zero-sum game. They hoard everything, trust nobody, and plan to go it alone. But the data from every modern conflict says the opposite. Isolated individuals die at 4 times the rate of those embedded in functional trade networks. Why? Because no one person can produce everything they need. You might have food, but no medicine. Your neighbor might have medicine, but no water purification. The guy 2 doors down might have water filters, but no ammunition. The only way everyone survives is through voluntary exchange, and that means you need to establish a barter economy before the chaos starts. But here's the catch. Barter only works if you're trading high-demand, low-bulk items that everyone needs and nobody has enough of. If you try to trade a 50-pound bag of rice, you're going to get robbed. If you try to trade a brick of .22 ammo, you're going to start a gunfight. You need micro goods, small, divisible, universally desired, and you need to position yourself as the guy who has them. Here's the unconventional solution. You're going to spend $200 this week on the top 10 micro barter items, and you're going to quietly let your trusted network know you're open for trade. Item 1, Bic lighters, 100 count, $50. Everyone needs fire, and a lighter is worth a meal in a grid-down scenario. Item 2, AA and AAA batteries, 200 count, $60. Flashlights, radios, medical devices, all run on these. Item 3, alcohol wipes or isopropyl alcohol, 50 bottles, $30. Sanitation, first aid, disinfection, irreplaceable. Item 4, ibuprofen or acetaminophen, 1,000 tablets, $20. Pain management is a quality of life issue that becomes a life or death issue fast. Item 5, salt, 25 pounds, $15. Electrolytes, food preservation, and trade value that's been recognized for 5,000 years. Item 6, duct tape, 20 rolls, $30. Fixes everything from boots to shelters to wounds. Item 7, paracord 1,000 feet, $40. Lashing, traps, clotheslines, endless uses. Item 8, tampons and pads, 50 boxes, $30. Half the population needs these, and nobody's stockpiling them. Item 9, toilet paper, 100 rolls, $30. Sounds trivial until you don't have it. Item 10, disposable razors, 100 count, $20. Morale, hygiene, and tradable. Total, about $300, and you've just become the most valuable person in your neighborhood. The science here is behavioral economics and network theory. In a resource-scarce environment, The individual who controls the flow of essential goods occupies a position of disproportionate influence. You're not hoarding. You're becoming a market maker, and in exchange for your goods, you'll receive intelligence, labor, skills, and reciprocal support that you can't buy with money. The multiplier. Every successful trade builds trust, and trust is a foundation of collective security. 10 successful trades turn you from a stranger into a trusted node. 20 trades make you indispensable. By day 7, you're not just surviving, you're leading. Practical application. This weekend, you're going to approach your 3 most trusted neighbors, and you're going to propose a simple protocol. Each household specializes in stockpiling 2 categories of goods, and you establish a private, secure location for trade meetings. Maybe someone's garage, maybe a neutral backyard. You agree on a rough exchange rate. 1 lighter equals 1 can of food, 1 roll of duct tape equals 5 tampons. Whatever. The specifics don't matter. The structure does. You're building the framework for a functional microeconomy. And when the stores are looted and the trucks stop running, you'll have a system in place that everyone understands and everyone benefits from. But here's the dark side. Trade makes you a target if you're not careful. Which brings us to thing number 8, the final and most critical prep. And it's the one that'll determine whether you make it to week 2 or become a cautionary tale. Thing number 8, develop and rehearse a tactical withdrawal plan for when your primary location becomes untenable. Here's the mistake. People think their Harden home is a fortress that'll never fall. They invest everything, gear, supplies, time, into one location, and they have zero plan for what happens if that location is compromised. But the reality of urban and suburban warfare is that no fixed position is impregnable. Superior numbers, fire, heavy weapons, or simple attrition will eventually breach any defense. The question isn't if you'll have to leave. It's when and whether you'll leave on your terms or theirs. I've seen too many families die because they stayed too long, because they couldn't accept that the home they defended for 6 days was lost, because they didn't have a withdrawal plan. The ones who survived were the ones who knew their red lines, who had rally points, who could grab their essentials and move in under 3 minutes. That's not retreat. It's tactical flexibility. And it's the difference between dying in place and living to fight another day. Here's the unconventional solution. Tonight, you're going to map out 3 egress routes from your home and establish 2 rally points within a 2-mile radius. You're going to identify red lines, objective triggers that mean it's time to go. Examples: fire, overwhelming force, loss of water supply, encirclement, or casualties you can't treat. You're going to pre-pack 2 go bags per person, a primary and a backup, each with 72 hours of no-cook food, water purification, shelter, first aid, ammunition, and documents. You're going to stage these bags in separate locations, 1 near the front door, 1 near the back, so if one exit is blocked, you have redundancy. You're going to rehearse a nighttime withdrawal drill. Lights out, someone yells go, and you see if you can grab your bags, rally your family, and exit the building in under 3 minutes. If you can't, you practice until you can. The science here is military doctrine. The most dangerous moment in any operation is the withdrawal under pressure. Casualties spike, coordination breaks down, and panic takes over. The only way to mitigate that is through rehearsal and discipline. The multiplier. A smooth, fast withdrawal preserves your combat effectiveness and keeps your family intact. A chaotic scramble gets people killed, gear left behind, and survivors scattered. Practical application. You're going to designate Rally Point Alpha, somewhere close, like a neighbor's yard or a park, and Rally Point Bravo, somewhere farther, like a wooded area or a commercial building you scouted. You're going to share these locations with your network, so if you get separated, everyone knows where to regroup. You're going to cache supplies at Rally Point Bravo, food, water, ammo, medical. So if you can't go back home, you have something to work with, and you're going to accept right now that your home is a tool, not a shrine. If it stops serving your survival, you leave it behind without hesitation. The families who survive long-term conflicts aren't the ones with the best stuff. They're the ones with the best decision-making and the willingness to adapt when the plan falls apart. All right, let's bring this home. We've just covered 8 things you must do now to survive the first week of World War III, and every single one of them runs counter to mainstream prepper advice you've been fed. Forget bug-out fantasies. Harden your home. Forget lone wolf tactics. Build a network. Forget bulk food. Go high density and no cook. Forget basic first aid. Train for trauma. Forget hoping for the best. Establish rules of engagement. Forget relying on the grid. Preposition power and comms. Forget hoarding. Become a trader. Forget dying in place. Plan your withdrawal. These aren't just tips. They're a framework, a decision matrix that's been tested in the worst environments humans have ever created. Mogadishu, Aleppo, Donetsk, Kabul. The principles don't change. The people who survive are the ones who accept reality faster, adapt smarter, and execute better than everyone around them. Let's do a quick reality check. The odds of a near-peer conflict in the next 12 to 36 months are higher than they've been since the Cold War. We got great power competition between the U.S. and China intensifying over Taiwan. Russia fully committed in a grinding war of attrition, Iran on the edge of nuclear breakout, and North Korea testing ICBMs like their fireworks. Any one of those flashpoints could escalate into a regional conflict, and regional conflicts have a nasty habit of going global when alliances activate. NATO Article 5, the U.S.-Japan Mutual Defense Treaty, the Abraham Accords. These are tripwires, and we're stumbling around in the dark. I'm not saying World War III is inevitable. I'm saying the probability is non-zero and rising, and if you wait until CNN is showing mushroom clouds, you've waited too long. The time prepares now, while the stores are stocked, while the internet works, while you can still move freely and think clearly. But here's the empowering part. You don't need to be a Navy SEAL or a prepper with $1 million bunker to survive. You need to be smart, disciplined, and willing to do the work that 92% of people won't do. Everything I've laid out in this video is achievable in the next 7 days for under $2,000, and most of it is achievable in the next 72 hours for under $500. This isn't about money, it's about priority. You can spend $500 on another night out, another gadget, another thing you don't need, or you can spend it on the preps that'll keep your family alive when the world goes dark. That's not a hypothetical. It's a choice you're making right now, and you'll live or die by it. So let's talk about synthesis. The 8 things I've given you aren't isolated tasks. They're interlocking systems that reinforce each other. A hardened home without a network is a tomb. A network without trauma skills is a casualty list. Trauma skills without supplies are useless. Supplies without security are stolen. Security without comms is blind. Comms without power are dead. Power without barter is isolated. Barter without a withdrawal plan is a trap. You need all 8, and you need them to work together as a coherent survival strategy. That's what separates the 8% who make it from the 92% who don't. It's not luck. It's systems thinking, and you're building those systems starting today. Now, here's where I want to hear from you. I've given you the framework, but every situation is different. Some of you are in urban apartments, some in suburban homes, some on rural land. Your specific implementation will vary, but the principles are universal. So drop a comment below and answer this. Which of these 8 things are you going to tackle first this weekend? Are you hardening your home, building your network, assembling your trauma kit? I want to know, because the people who commit publicly are 3 times more likely to follow through than the ones who keep it private. Make the commitment, hold yourself accountable, and then come back in 7 days and report what you did. Let's build a community of people who are actually ready, not just talking about it. Here's the challenge, and I'm going to be blunt. I know half of you are going to close this video, say, that was interesting, and then do absolutely nothing. You'll go back to scrolling, back to binge-watching Netflix, back to pretending that the world is stable and that someone else will handle the crisis. And when the lights go out, when the sirens start, when your kids are scared and hungry and you don't have a plan, you're going to remember this moment. You're going to remember that someone gave you the roadmap and you chose not to follow it. Don't be that person. Be the one who acts. Be the one who prepares. Be the one who survives. And if you think I'm being too harsh, good. You should be uncomfortable because comfort is the enemy of readiness. Next video, I'm going to cover the mistakes that'll get you killed in week 2, because surviving week 1 is just the beginning. The real test comes when your supplies start running low, when the initial chaos settles into a grinding war of attrition, and when the social order completely collapses. If you want to know how to navigate that, hit subscribe smash the bell, and make sure you're here for the next one. This is going to be a series, and each video builds on the last. Miss one, and you'll have a gap in your knowledge that could cost you everything. Before I go, here's a hidden bonus I promised. The single most important prep isn't on this list. It's not gear, it's not supplies, it's not skills. It's mindset, the will to survive, the refusal to quit, the ability to stare into the abyss and say, not today. I've seen guys with all the training and all the gear fold under pressure, and I've seen soft civilians with nothing but heart outlast everyone. The one thing you can't stockpile, the one thing you can't buy, is a decision made right now in this moment that you will do whatever it takes to protect your family and make it through. If you got that, you've got a chance. If you don't, no amount of gear will save you. Final question for the comment section, and I want honest answers. On a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do you really think you are right now? Not how ready you want to be, not how ready you think you should be. How ready are you today? If the siren started tonight, drop your number below. No judgment, just data. And then, whatever that number is, let's move it up by 3 points in the next 7 days. Deal? All right. Stay safe, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.